Hello. Hey, y'all.
Hello.
Hey, Samantha.
Yes.
Do you know about the video thing already?
Oh, is it not allowing y'all to turn on video? Sorry.
That's okay.
Let me get that. I thought I had started that. There you go.
Here we go.
What's happening? Do I see everyone? What's going on here? There it is. Having computer issues. Hello, everyone. How are you doing today?
Good. Hey, I'm still having trouble getting my video started. Any suggestions, Samantha?
Let's see. Where are you looking to start your video?
Oh, I've got the participant panel up on the right, and I'm trying to click on the little camera, and it just says enter a new screen name. So I say okay, but I didn't get a prompt to enter the password to get started. Is that?
You know, I've entered meetings without that as well. You might try exiting the meeting and then coming back in and seeing if that helps.
I'll do that. Thanks.
I assume Howard's going to jump on any minute. I haven't heard otherwise. He usually shows up. So just wait for Jen and him to get on real quick, and then we'll get started. I don't think it'll be a super long meeting today.
Hey, there I am. Thanks.
Hey, Jim. I want to give Howard just another minute or two to jump on, and if he doesn't jump on, we'll get started with that.
Zach, I just got an email from you. I didn't have time to look at it. Is that anything I need to have handy?
I think we'll chat at this meeting about basically filling in this document over the next couple of weeks.
Great, thanks.
How's everyone's week been?
Great.
Good. Anything exciting happen?
I went to the dentist.
That is very exciting.
Which is exciting these days.
Yeah. I was telling Chelsea the other day, we went, I had been home all day, and my husband really wanted pizza, and I can't have pizza right now. And so I was like, don't worry, I'll go get the pizza. He goes, are you sure you're not going to get to eat any of it? I said, let me go get the pizza.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. It's a treat.
It was exciting.
Did you go camping at Thanksgiving? Do I remember you mentioning that?
That wasn't me, but I do recall someone mentioning they were going camping.
Oh, yeah.
I
That's what I
that
want
was.
to do.
Right.
I haven't had enough nerve for that lately.
It's cold.
Not seeing Howard, I think we should go ahead and get started. For those of us, I guess Laura, who was here back in, I guess it was February, March, when we were first starting on this, basically the Sustainability Commission volunteered, or we got tasked in partnership with the City Council to work on a dashboard for the Climate Action Plan, basically be a way where you could get a visual update on how the CAP is going as the CAP develops over the next 10 years. And so I think that when we spoke in March, we had good company join us, and I think there was the idea we wanted the greenhouse gas inventory put online in some fashion that people could click through. And then we also, what I started talking about was basically alternative performance measures. So rather than measuring greenhouse gas emissions directly, that we would instead have some proxy measures. So for example, our EV targets for 2030, a lot of our emission reductions are supposed to come from EVs. So one of the sets of data we could track and show people would be, are we moving towards our EV goal for 2030, and are we on track to meet that goal? And so I think that what we're hopefully trying to do is find some relatively small number of data sets that will give you a good idea on what progress we are making on the CAP. So that's, I think, the 30,000 foot level. Are there any kind of questions or comments before we move on further?
Could I jump in there and say that we really want your input in identifying the measures that you're interested in, but it's not your job to figure out the data sets. That's a staff role, just because we want to make sure we're getting good data, unbiased data, and all of that. So that would be a staff role, and we're happy to share like the sources for sure. And if you know of sources and want to share that with us, that's great, but I just want to make that clear kind of division of labor there. So we're really looking on recommendations on what are the most important measures for us to be tracking.
So are we brainstorming about what those pieces of data are right now, or is that yet to come?
I think that's for today and for the next 2 weeks. I'm hoping by next meeting we'll have a pretty good idea of what we're hoping for.
Okay.
And it's a matter of seeing if we can find those things and getting them all put together in one place.
I have some suggestions when you're ready for them. So.
Great.
Can I add just a couple more things? Sure. Just from a staff perspective, some things that would be helpful to keep in mind are that we're very resource limited. So just thinking about the measures that you choose, we're not going to be able to collect new data. So again, we'll do our best to find a data source for anything you want us to measure, but we may come back and say, hey, there's no data set for that. Let's rethink how we're getting at whatever measure. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about measures. If there's opportunities to draw on the work of other departments, that's really helpful too. So I sent a document that summarizes what Envision Eugene folks are doing with some measures there that might be interesting to take a look at so that we can kind of cross-reference and use those resources wisely. It's also great because it draws that connection for folks that like housing policy is climate policy, for example. And then, gosh, the other thing I wanted to say is, again, from our perspective, in the CAP, we have 3 primary buckets of emissions. We also have resiliency. We have consumption as its own chapter. So any sort of alignment with those would be helpful as well as we try and organize our thoughts in that way for our community, which I think has been a pretty effective like communications strategy.
You're muted, Zach.
Opposite what I meant to do. I put a little document together I thought we could just use as a sort of a framework that we could just add stuff to in terms of what are the primary goals or measures that we think that we need to track. What are our goals for that particular measure? And then the last question is, what is the data set to go along with that? Apparently staff is telling us that they'll help us a lot with that last step. So I think if we have thoughts, we can put them in there, but hopefully they will help us finalize that part. So I guess I will go ahead and pull that document up if I can figure out how to do that. Let's see. it is. Okay.
Zach, sorry, before you get started, is it possible to zoom in just a little bit?
I don't know how to do that.
There in the top right where you see 100%. If you want to increase it maybe to like 125, under there's your items file edit view. It's right underneath view.
I'm sorry, where?
On your screen's file edit view, where it says Eugene CAP Dashboard, and then 100%. There you go, like 125 maybe, or that works too, whichever.
Okay. So to start off with, I just tried to break it up into a few different sections, fairly similar to the ones that just got mentioned. If you go to our GHG inventory, a little over half of our emissions are from transportation. So I would expect of our GHG related measures, about half of them would probably be related to transportation. And these are sort of the three that I was guessing would be in there, would be something around our EV targets, something around our bike ped targets, and something around our transit targets. There might be other ones that should fit in there, but those were the three that were the top of my mind. For natural gas, I think that's something we need to find out what those alternative performance measures might be, given that what's going to happen with natural gas, I think, is still somewhat in the air. I think we might have to come back to that one as the city develops additional measures to deal with the natural gas issue. There would likely be whatever those measures are, are what would make it into potentially things that we would track. And then and then there's also waste. If the county moves forward on some of its things around waste, I expect, for example, increasing the amount of landfill gas capture that they capture. That's something we could also potentially put in there for waste. And so I think over the next couple weeks, it would be really good if we could figure out, define what the 2030 goals for each of these things are, and start to, I guess, look at the Envision Eugene measures, and also start thinking about what, if the data sets are not in the Envision Eugene data set, that we might start thinking about where staff might be able to find good data sets for those things. Other than the GHG inventories, we also have resiliency measures in the CAP. And so I think it would be good to find 3 to 5 of those that we would maybe also want to track and have included in the dashboard. The one that came to mind was urban forestry, but I'm sure there are others in the CAP of those resiliency measures that we might find a couple that we want to track. Yeah, so why don't I stop there for a moment, and if folks have thoughts or comments on how to get to where we need to with each of these things. But yeah.
I have a comment about natural gas, and I'm not sure if it fits exactly, but a very useful piece of information would be city building energy use broken down, by natural gas and electricity. And I'm guessing that the energy management team, for city facilities would have that already. And, we could just perhaps figure out a place to plug that into the dashboard, and it wouldn't be a big deal to gather the data. And that could give us, particularly since the city is occupying, my understanding, the city is going to be occupying the LCC building, which is not a natural gas building. So that would give us an interesting basis of comparison of, buildings that are about the same size using natural gas versus the alternative to natural gas, which, the only one that I'm aware of in a large building is the geothermal type heat pump, electric heating. So any thoughts on that sort of data? Is that, it's not a direct correlation with our 2030 goals, but it's a piece of those goals. it gives information, you know, that would suggest if we're making progress or not.
Yeah, Jim, that information is in our 2017 inventory, and we're about to release our update, our 2019 update inventory. Hopefully our goal is actually to get that out next week. And that's included in there. So happy to include anything in the inventory as a part of this dashboard, but maybe another question that is maybe more of a design question that we would get to down the road is like, how do we don't want to assume people are just going to go to the inventories, the reports, they're kind of dense. I think it'd be great as we kind of get into design to think about how we incorporate the most important pieces of the information in the inventory into like a more visual display along with this dashboard. What do y'all think of that?
Are you saying like trying to make it useful to the public?
Yeah, like pulling out particular pieces of the inventory, like Jim suggesting that it could be that measure, like the natural gas used in city buildings, and incorporating that as part of the dashboard.
I guess I would like to see greenhouse gas emissions per square foot of building. I mean, that tells you a lot, you know, and then of course, the more natural gas you use, the bigger that number is. So that really gives you, I mean, that's a pretty, you know, that's very concise. It's, I mean, I would like to see the whole, you know, the entire energy bill display, but, you know, just in terms of the most critical data, you know, tons of CO2 equivalent per square foot would tell us.
Yeah, we could definitely look into whether that's possible. I'll just tell you right off the bat that if we just look at our facilities side of things, what's the most interesting piece of the data is that I think it's certainly over 50% of our energy goes to heating pools, heating our three pools.
They're big energy.
And so when you look at like energy per square foot, I think it'd be a good conversation if we think about what you want to know. That would certainly skew the data, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it would, you know, energy per square foot only makes sense if you're looking at particular buildings, and then you would know that, you know, a pool, an indoor pool is a very special case, similar to a hospital or, you know, any building that requires tons of outside air. But pools are huge.
I think something else. Oh, sorry, Jim.
Pools would be very. I mean, that would be very difficult to replace natural gas for heating pools and indoor pool areas.
But we're like on the bleeding edge of that, which is really cool in the Echo Hollow pool renovation.
That is, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm happy to, I don't know, Laura, you had a question there too, but I think that'd be cool to understand what you all are interested in from the inventories and figure out if there's a way to kind of highlight that in this work.
Yeah, and I was seeing this as beneficial to like everyone in Eugene. So maybe a bigger picture, like looking at natural gas, we could split it up by city or university, but then also people's houses. So it's looking at the city's use of gas, like everybody in the city. And then the other thing, since EWEB's peak power rates is a climate consideration, and they're trying to educate people how to reduce the peak loads. So that could be something, if they're tracking that, to put like how we're doing as a community to reduce our peaks.
I think that'd be beyond what we collect as the city, like, because that's kind of EWEB's scope, but we can ask the question of them and try to understand what they're doing for data reporting on that.
I was thinking too, in terms of how you organize, you know, when we're thinking about a dashboard that's fairly high level, you know, we're trying to see, you know, if you turn one knob versus another, you know, where are the adjustments made? And one framework that the city uses quite a bit is, you know, when we look at residential versus commercial versus industrial. And so that could be another way of looking at what kind of data you're looking at and how you want to report it. That would match a lot of other guiding plans and policies around the city as well. So there'd be sort of a natural fit for that.
I think that's great. I think that's a very important way to look at the categories. And I'm very interested in how much natural gas U of O uses, and I have had trouble finding that on their website. So if there's a way we could ask them for an update on that, I think that would be very helpful.
Jim, I would suggest just reaching out to their sustainability director, Steve Maital. Use his U of O address, not his EWEB address, but I imagine he could get that to you fairly easily.
Great, thanks.
And Jim, I was going to send this out to you later today for next week's meeting. The state has the DEQ has every entity that has air quality permits for greenhouse gas emissions. There's about 13 in Eugene. Okay, and UO is about 20,000 tons per year. And the large majority of that is from their natural gas burning power plant that they have there.
Right. Great.
So 20,000 tons per year. The only one that's bigger is there's a flake board manufacturer here in town.
I'd love to see all of those. Yeah, thank you.
So I'll send that to you this evening. Sorry, stepping back for a second, I actually want to talk a little bit more about the transportation part of this, since I think it's actually one of the biggest and one of the most complex. You know, we had the EV folks present last week, and I think that we know I think they had a good data set that they found for tracking EV and our progress towards our 2030 targets, which was really awesome. We're going to have them presenting again in a week and a half around bike ped rates, and I'm hoping that similarly we can kind of suss out what data sets will be valuable. I have sent a question regarding basically when the I'm sorry about the bright when the climate action plan was being reviewed and there was a gap analysis done, there was certain GHG reductions associated with the TSP being completed. And I guess whatever assumptions went into that projection, I thought those might be good as targets to use. Chelsea, do you know what are the assumptions that went into that analysis, and are we tracking data associated with some of those assumptions? I sent out a document. Well, when we requested that they present, I sent the performance measures from the TSP. Are those the ones that went into that analysis, or is it something else?
I'm not sure what's used for the TSP, so maybe, but in terms of what went into that analysis, we used a model that LCOG actually runs for us called Vision Eval. It's something that's developed at the state level, and then it's being customized by different communities around the state, is my best understanding. I'm not the expert on this. Rob, who I assume is the one coming to talk to us, is. So that is being updated again as we speak. And one of the components in the CAP is to update the TSP goals so that they hit our CRO goals, and that'll be done in conjunction with update to this modeling tool. So that's all a long-winded way of saying there's many, many variables in that model. I've seen, I haven't seen the math of the model, but I've seen some of the back end of the model, and there's they just showed us, I think they showed us 25 at the last viewing. So it's not to say we're using all those levers, but part of figuring out how we're going to approach that work is figuring out which levers we're going to use. So I would ask Rob to talk more about that for sure. He could do a much better job than I'm doing here, but I think that's a smart approach to talk about what comes out of that modeling. But it's not as simple, we just looked at these three things. It's a complex model.
And to jump in on that, Zach, we'll actually have Reed Dunbar presenting. And when I checked in with him, I'm not sure that he had planned on that. So maybe I could check in with him about that before the meeting and see if that could be something he could bring with him.
Yeah, that would be great. And if he could comment on, well, I think the point is that, okay, so we're redoing that analysis and we're putting in even stronger targets, it sounds, or assumptions that went in the first time. I guess from my perspective, it would be really great if we could identify, if there's 25 that go into it, are there 3 to 5 that make the greatest difference? Maybe there's 25, but if there's a smaller number that are actually the key ones, and basically finding out if there's any data associated with those. You know, if we're setting a goal for such and such bike ped rate by 2030, how are we actually measuring our progress towards that?
Yeah, that makes sense, Zach. And I think for a work product from you all in the next, couple weeks to a month, I think what a reasonable outcome would be is for you all to articulate that you're interested in aligning with the modeling being used behind the TSP assumptions. And we will work with Rob to figure out what those, top 3 to 5 are, and we can bring that back to you. We can check in, but I think just to keep us rolling and not get kind of hung up in that, that'd be a good way to go.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the most complex subject, and so yeah, if we're just able to have a back and forth on those ones, I think that would be super valuable. And let's see, and I can send that other document again just so that the LCDC approved performance measures from the trans plan, if those are the same or different, there might be a lot of overlap between those ones that were already in the last TSP and the new one. And I keep on talking about this, but why don't I just share the document? If other people want to look at it later, then you can. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. All right, let's, I guess, maybe put transportation to the side for a second, and then just, are there any other, I guess with this document, my thought would be, are there other parts here that I guess over the next 2 weeks, I guess I was hoping folks could look at the resiliency measures and maybe offer some alternative, basically different resiliency actions that we might also want to track, as well as kind of if you have other thoughts on the measures that we should track or the data sets that we should use just to add them to this document. Is that something that folks would feel comfortable doing over the next 2 weeks? Does that sound like a good thing to work on over the next 2 weeks?
It does. And I would like to throw out one that I would like to see included under the category of equity, and that is cost of energy. Because as we implement climate actions, I think it's really important to keep track of what that does to energy costs. That's very easy data to get too.
What my brain goes to is doing that on a cost adjusted basis as well as a net basis. I think sometimes it's not just about the cost per kilowatt hour, it's also how much you're putting into energy efficiency. So it might be that one community that's very energy efficient pays more for power on a per kilowatt hour basis, but pays less in total because they use a lot less. And also just making sure it's inflation adjusted so that we're not saying,
yeah, I think that's making it too complicated. I think, if you're talking about the impact on the community, it's really just how much does energy cost? I think that's a very useful, transparent piece of data to throw out there. And it's, you just got to go on the eWeb website or you just got to look at an electric bill and a gas bill to get that. So it's pretty easy. But it's just that's just my perspective on it. I'll be trying to publicize that information as we go forward, whether it's on the official dashboard or not. So, I think that's really important to build equity and triple bottom line into the whole product. And I think that's, if we're doing something, if our greenhouse gas emissions are going way down, but the cost of energy doubles, then, I think that indicates that we're not really doing a triple bottom line approach. So, but that's all I need to say at this point.
Yeah, I take your points. I think Yes, I do also think you need to say that, yeah, the quantity times the price equals the total price, right? And that's important, that if you use far less energy. I guess on the equity point, it would be possible potentially, the EWEB data I think would be easier than natural gas, where the price varies, changes every month. I guess I have other equity thoughts around, for example, on urban forestry, that we're trying to get to the new goal is to get to from 23% now to I think 30% coverage by 2030, and also to have more equitable distribution throughout the city. And I think it's fairly easy to put on a dashboard, hey, we're at 25% and 26%. It's a lot harder to put the parts about the equity and making sure that we're hitting our equity targets. And so I'll just put that out there as a question mark, more of we might want to be thinking about, in addition to these data sets, if there is an equity lens to overlay on it. I don't know how to do it or do it effectively.
Zach, can I jump in on that? I think overall I'm hearing a lot of good ideas for different measures, and I'm happy to have the ideas, but I also want to kind of take some of the pressure off too and say, like, if you can articulate the question you're trying to answer, then we can look for data that might fit that question. So just a different approach that you could take, so that you don't have to be like, we can't do that because I don't know the data set. We have a ton of people working at the city and partners and things that could help us think through that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through in terms of a relatively simple dashboard with, this is a resiliency measure and we just have the one data set to go along with it, but it doesn't get into your coverage of the city as a much, your percentage coverage of the city is a fairly simple piece of data to communicate, whereas through a relatively simple dashboard. Whereas I'm concerned that if as we start to overlay equity considerations and all of a sudden each set of data becomes much more complicated in how you're supposed to communicate it, that we're maybe making more work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think just to kind of get back to roles, like, your job is to ask the question and the questions the community want to hear about, and we can do the digging. And so on this question in particular, I know that as part of this work, there's a GIS component. I don't want to commit to what that is, but it could be that they're already tracking what you want. Maybe there's a mapping already done, and that it would be just a matter of, maybe that information wouldn't be one of your metrics in this dashboard, but we could link to that extra information, and it's available. So I just want to encourage you to, your role is to think about, I think before we said, what are the 10 or 15 measures that are most important to include in this dashboard? Mm-hmm. And that could be framed as the questions you're trying to answer. It doesn't have to be that you have it all figured out, and then we can go from there.
And I wanted to throw in there too that, when we think of data, we often think of quantitative data, but qualitative data is really important also. And I think qualitative data is much more easily captured when we're thinking about things like equity. What stories are people telling? Where are you hearing from people? Whose needs are you hearing? So I wanted to throw that out there as well, that being creative in identifying those questions and what kind of data you're looking for is also really helpful.
I guess, Chelsea, this might be a question for you, because there's a resiliency group in the Environmental and Climate Justice Coalition. And I could ask them, but I wouldn't want to ask them if, only if what they provide would be used. I wouldn't want to ask if it was just purely brainstorming. But if it's at the point where the response would be utilized, I'd be happy to do that, because they've been, thinking about resiliency and equity for a while, and they have a subcommittee on that.
Yeah, Laura, I appreciate that. And we definitely don't want to ask and then not use things. That's a little bit hard for me to answer though, if it's just because I don't know what data we have access to, and we want to make sure that those data sources have some sort of vetting. So there could be disagreement on whether data sources can be used too. So I don't know, what do you think? I don't know what kind of, do you have any intuition about what kind of measures they might suggest?
I would guess, I'm I'm just completely guessing because I'm not in that subcommittee. I would guess maybe the like warming and cooling stations, kind of protecting vulnerable populations, that type of thing.
Yeah, like something like having a count of warming and cooling stations, or maybe the amount of people that can be served or something like that.
Yeah.
So on just that example coming out of my mouth, I'm thinking we could definitely do a count that of the, you know, buildings, but then like the number of people who are able to be served, I'm not sure if we can get that information. I just am not in that field. So does that help at all in terms of like, I don't want to overpromise to you.
I mean, I could just frame it like you said, like this is, if there's not the data, it can't be used, but there is this dashboard being developed and resiliency measures is part of it. So like, what are your top 5 things?
Yeah.
If you put them on there, I could ask in that way.
That sounds good.
Okay.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Laura, can you talk a little bit more about the group that you're talking about? I'm not aware of what group you're.
The NAACP and Beyond Toxics have, it's a coalition, the Environmental and Climate Justice Coalition. And so there's a bunch of people in it representing a lot of different organizations, but it's run by the NAACP, and they have a resiliency subcommittee. So they're working on, you know, some solar panels in churches and some garden projects and a couple of other things, but I've never participated in that subcommittee. I've like read the meeting notes and stuff, but I don't know the types of conversations that they're having.
So I guess my hope for the next 2 weeks is that we could go to our networks and then look at the Ghg inventory and the current actions in the CAP, and basically add our thoughts on what we would like to see included in a dashboard of like our top 10 items. And then we could meet back in 2 weeks to kind of troubleshoot any issues that have come up and narrow down the list that we've come up with. Does that sound like an okay approach?
It does, Zach. And would we be encouraged to email each other as we go through that, or, you know, how can we, you know, would we want to communicate in any way? Or
my understanding is that that this shared document, that as long as there's only one of us on it at a time, that we can add things to it. But then for discussion, we would have all of our discussion in 2 weeks as part of this next meeting.
so no offline email discussions about the document. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, that you would be able to add your notes to this document, and that we can read the notes, but that we should comment and have all of our discussions as part of these recorded public meetings.
Okay, great.
And just to add a point of process to that, basically it's, you can't have anything over quorum outside of the public meeting, which for this size of group is basically you plus one other person. So, and I wanted to highlight that as well then. Yeah, if you're working on the document, just to double check and clarify that if you've got more than 2 folks on at a time, you might want to coordinate that.
Just as a general question to keep myself out of trouble, is email, do sustainability commissioners email each other?
Yeah, you're welcome to email each other. I would avoid group emails, but individually is safe. Of course, you know, no decisions can be made. And just to be super safe, my understanding is conversations around financial matters need to be in a public meeting space.
So what if we just want to share interesting articles or
of course
ask each other questions? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Jim, the spirit of it's all about Oregon public officials law, right? And so the spirit of it is that we don't want to be deliberating towards a decision that's not in front of the public eye. And so anything that could possibly be perceived as deliberating towards a decision, we want to do that in the meeting.
Yeah, well, I see a lot of, I mean, not a lot. I've seen committee proposals and, you know, that sort of arrived at a sustainability commission that looked like they had had a lot of preparation and maybe communication between people. Is that I mean, it just seems like that's going on, you know, from my point of view as a newcomer to the group. It seems like, you know, it just seems pretty clear that there's been collaboration, you know, outside the official meetings. So I just want to really understand when I'm, you know, how much of that I can do and how much I can't do.
I think it depends on the committee. So if you're seeing a finished product, for example, that comes to a Sustainability Commission regular meeting where commissioners are voting on it, the process should have been, which is my understanding that it has been, that finished product was completed within committee. So like what you're doing now, with maybe one person putting, you know, polishing touches on it before it got to the commission for a vote. So the commission sees a polished document. So when you're, for example, attending the regular commission meeting, it's a polished document that everyone votes on and then you move forward with.
Okay, I'll probably have more questions as we go along. I'm a little fuzzy on a lot of this. So thank you for your patience.
That's what I'm here for.
Jim, I would just say, as long as you're just sharing information, it should be fine. If you're actually working with somebody else on a work product, make sure that the total number of people that you're talking to is less than quorum. So if you wanted to draft a committee proposal, like to create a committee with somebody else, as long as you talk to less than 5 people on the commission, you're going to be less than quorum and you're going to be all set.
That sounds, yeah, okay, that sounds fine to me. It sounds a little different than what I heard Chelsea say, but again, I'll just be careful to copy staff and use Zach and tell me if I'm out of line. But I do have, you know, I have a lot of information I'd love to share, but I don't want to. I want to be careful about that. So thanks.
Yeah, as long as we're not raising like questions and having back and forths, I generally think that we're gonna getting ourselves in trouble. It's just information sharing, and if you want to work with like one other person on something, as long as, you know, in this committee we only have 3 people, so 2 people is a quorum, so it doesn't really work for us. But if ever a committee, like a 6-person committee, and 2 people want to, you know, polish something before bringing it back to the full commission, as far as I know, that's technically allowed. But just here's a specific
example. I have an article that I'd love to share with the whole commission about a project at Ball State University in Indiana. They took a coal-fired central steam plant and they replaced it, or are replacing it, with a geothermal heat pump plant. And I think it's just a fascinating article. Is it okay just to send that to everybody?
Yes. You know, something I heard interesting about apparently UO was considering doing a heat pump with the river, which I have not heard anything about that in the last like year, but apparently they were looking at that about a year or 2 ago. Yeah,
that's what, it's a similar sized campus, so I thought that might be an interesting comparison. So it just cost $83 million. And
oh my God. Okay, well, I think that if anybody has GHG reduction measures or resiliency measures, that we can put that into this document over the next 2 weeks. I will follow up with Samantha regarding the presentation in a week and a half to maybe see if we can get some of this stuff sussed out for the like PED portions that are going to be presented on. And then we'll meet back in 2 weeks to review and discuss and decide next steps. So I think, yeah, so I just, if we can fill in the reduction measures and the resiliency measures as best we can, I think most of that will come from the current climate action plan, and just the measures in there, and just trying to figure out the top, you know, 10 to 15 that we want to track. Okay, any questions, comments before we break off? Okay, seeing none, I hope everybody has a really great afternoon and weekend.
You too.
Thanks everyone, have a good day.